Hey everyone, so today I will be reviewing the Netflix one-off series, more of a just a stand-up show. The Courage to Be Vulnerable by Berne Brown. Really funny, really amazing, a really nice person, and it had a very authentic yet a very mature vibe to it. Felt very personal, but anyhow, there were a lot of key takeaways, and I wanted to share some of them right now. Let's start with the first one. So, she was a public speaker, and there was a stage when she was doing these presentations. And she decided to do a TED Talk back at her University of Houston. And then instead of doing her traditional one, she decided to go with vulnerability, being completely vulnerable, and she just goes on to the stage and just talks about all of these, opens herself up properly, and then she gets back home and she freaks out a bit. But anyhow, so to her surprise, she didn't wanted the TED Talk. She thought, oh, just 500 people, right? No worries, it will disappear on its own. But guess what happens? TED decides to put it on the big tent, and one view, two view, three view, four view, 5 million, 6 million. So it gets very famous. And then she starts reading the comments. And, well, there were some pretty shitty comments. And her reaction at that moment was between two thoughts. I'm trained for this. I have always been ready for this. Like the hit and everything will also be, oh, I just want the earth to swallow me up right now. I just want to die this instance. But anyway, so what she does is she decides to watch Downtown Abbey instead for the next 7 hours. That's all she does to just avoid the Houston, Texas experience and all the response she was getting. And during that, she sees the people. If you have this habit of googling weird stuff, right, just to avoid something. So she started googling who was the president during the time of Downtown Abbey. It was Theodore Roosevelt, and then she googles him and finds his speech. It's honestly surprising how you end up to something like this, and that ends up changing your life forever. Life can be really surprising at times, right? So, anyways, the quotation said, "It's not the critics who count. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done it different. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again and again, who strives, and who in the end, while he may not know the triumph of high achievement, at least when he fails, he does so daring greatly, sorry." One second. And she talks about how her life, the minute before this quotation and after it, had changed completely. And it is a very thought-provoking quotation. It just shuts down all the people who don't matter. So, anyways, she goes on to say, which is a fact, if you choose to live daringly, you're going to get your ass kicked. You are going to fall. You are going to fail. And you are going to know heartbreak. It's a choice. The self-affirmation that she tells herself, today I'll choose courage over comfort. And quite often, personally speaking, that is a fact. When you put yourself out there, you should be prepared for failures. The higher your goal, the greater the difficulty you will face. The more you should be willing to accept it. It would be strange if everything went perfectly right. You're definitely going to run into problems, and accept it. Then she talks about the concept of vulnerability, and this has been, I don't give enough thought to this concept until watching this presentation. It is very good. So she goes on to say vulnerability is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. That is vulnerability. Forget the scientific definition and everything like that. So, vulnerability would be accepting the possibility that you are going to fail and you still show up regardless. The uncertainty, the success might be huge or you might topple over. But instead of staying in your comfort zone, you put yourself out there. It could be telling someone you love them. It could be asking someone to, I don't know, mentor you, showing up for a job, having a crucial conversation with your partner, showing up to an event, doing public speaking, taking on opportunities that you know you're not ready for, taking risks. It could be many things. So he talks about the story of how a guy ran up to her when she was done with one of her presentations, and he goes on to tell her, "You changed my life." And then she goes, "Oh, yeah?" And then let me tell you the story. So he goes on to the story, and he says, "My parents watched their TED talk and they shared it to me, and how you should take the initiative and say that you love the person and all of that. So I go on this date with someone, and I plan on telling them that I love them during the date, and that I couldn't wait for the lava cake to come in, so I was initially planning on telling it after the lava cake. But anyways, midway while it's arriving, I just look at them and say, I love you." And the response she gives is, "I don't think we should be seeing each other anymore. Let's date different people." And so she leaves, gets up and leaves. And he, on the ride back, gets back into his car. Throughout the journey, he's like, F Bernie, F Bernie, F Bernie. Not the kind of life-changing story you were expecting, right? Really shocker. But he goes on to his room and then tells the people over there, his roommates, and they gave him this weird example. Oh, you can't move towards them. You have to move away from them, and as you move away from them, they move towards you. Otherwise, it's the opposite way around. And then he goes on to say that, no, that's not what I want. That's not how things should be. Which is perfectly true. It is how it should be. And when you decide to put yourself out there, you might face situations like these. But you know what's worse? Which she talks about in the end. Regret not having said that. Moving on. We can measure how brave you are by how vulnerable you're willing to be. That's the measure of bravery, which was very thought provoking. Bravery is not just like you boast about strength and all of these things. It's also in terms of how willing are you to put yourself out there. And this could apply to any aspect. To protect someone you care about, to make those difficult choices, because that might require sacrifice at times. Are you willing to get out of your comfort zone for the things that are important to you? Isn't that strength? Anyways, also, which is a very important lesson that she continues and discusses. You care about those that are important to you, not the idiots everywhere. So, people's opinion matter. When the joke was that how all of us say, "Oh, I don't give a shit about people." That's false. Scientifically, we are hardwired to care about people, what they say, what they think. But you need to make sure you're only focusing on the people that are important to you, and not like the random strangers out there who haven't done anything in their life. Alright. Anyways, then she talks about the vacation. A very good joke comes in when her, like, she and her husband, they just tell their parents, if you want to see us, come and see us while we're on this vacation, but or schedule it on your own. Why she said that? Because his parents were divorced and remarried. Her parents too were divorced and remarried, so like 4 different families, and probably they don't want to run into each other, and just dealing with the hassle of scheduling it would have been fun. So she was like, schedule it on your own. I don't have time for that. But anyways, a really fun interaction happens later. But here's another great quotation. Great things about midlife is that you can play the tape until the end and make changes accordingly. The 30-year-olds don't have to worry about it. So essentially, when you're 50, you already know how things are going to happen based on what you say. She essentially, while swimming in the lake, tells her partner that I'm really um, happy to share this moment with you, this connection and everything. Who just brushes it off, saying, "Oh, the water is really nice today," and continues to swim. First, she thinks, "Oh, he's so overwhelmed by this love that we have that he doesn't know what to say." Well, she tries it again later, and he gets the same response. So then she gets mad, and the payback term. But anyways, they start having this conversation, uh, in which it eventually turns out that he was actually having a panic attack. But that's why he wasn't paying enough attention to her. But anyhow, um, the magic sentence is the stories we tell ourselves, so the brain can protect you. Quite often, we sometimes lie to ourselves, or we sometimes shape it in a way that might create a false perception of reality, which could be to your liking, could be to your disliking. But it's just something to be mindful of. What is the story that you tell yourself about yourself? Fact check it. It might be better, doesn't necessarily have to be worse, but quite often you might be avoiding a problem. Pay attention to that. Also, another important lesson, don't use other people's vulnerability against them. Not everyone opens themselves up to you, and our loved ones do, but you don't use that against them later. Okay? So if someone told you that they're feeling weak or something like that, a few days later when they're about to do something risky, you shouldn't be like, "Oh, are you feeling alright now? What happened to that weakness a few days back?" That's shitty behavior. A lot of us do that. I have done that. Now that it has been put into words to me, I'll make sure I avoid it as much as possible. Just be nice. Okay. Anyways, moving on. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. Everyone wants to feel loved and feel belonged. But quite a lot of us try to fit in instead. Not try to be your genuine, authentic self. Be vulnerable, who you are, to someone you care about. Instead of being yourself, you try to be like everyone else. And she goes on to say something extremely important. Most people avoid being vulnerable due to the fear of being hurt. That they, and that they will never feel loved because of it. So you have the choice of either feeling loved or avoiding the pain of getting rejected or whatever. A lot of people stick to the avoiding the pain of being rejected, so they never open themselves up or never work on that aspect of their life. Try to build that connection or be authentic or whatever, and they just try to fit in and avoid it as much as possible. The cost is too great, is what she said, is that you won't feel loved. Because of that, you might spend your whole life that way. Is it really worth it? That was something very provoking, and most people are doing that these days. Picture memory, another amazing lesson. So she picks her daughter up from school and they go paddle boating. And then she just sits there, closes her eyes, and then the she the mom asks her daughter, like Bernie asks her, and she's like, later on when she opens her eyes again, she says, "I was taking in a picture memory because I was so grateful for this environment we have, paddling in the lake, feeding ducks, and all of that. I wanted to absorb it in my memory." Have you ever done that before? But there have been a lot of memories where you just would have rather been present in the moment and felt happy about it. The little things that might not seem significant. You don't need a reason to select joy. You just do it without a reason. This is something she talks about later. Just do joyful things for the hell of it. Okay? Without a plan, pick joy over everything else. She gives the example of her son, how he wanted to get good grades. And she's like, fine, okay, let's work on it. And then he gets a school project later, which they which was supposed to be a helmet for Gladiator. And they both work on it, and he ends up winning the first prize in the school for the helmet. And then she asks her, so like the teacher gave them the option of either getting extra points for your grades or getting the secret treasure. So the mother goes and asks him, so how many extra credit points are you getting? And he tells him, no, I picked the secret treasure, which was like a bunch of Pokemon pencils, but he was joyful about that. It doesn't make any sense, right? But maybe in life you need to do that because you appreciate gratitude because of it. We quite often focus too much on waiting for something sufficient that we ignore all the moments that are very precious. And if you're not willing to fail, you can't innovate. You want to come up with solutions with ideas. If you're not willing to fail, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you won't be able to do it. This was an interesting message, which a lot of companies might struggle with. They're trying to be perfect, they don't want to make mistakes, but if you don't allow yourself to make mistakes, how will you actually come up with the right answers, better solutions, and everything? Brave leaders are never afraid of hard things. We focus on the unsaid. You do vulnerability knowingly, or vulnerability does you. This was a very important lesson. So she goes on and asks, in your life, how often have you, sorry, you've made it this far, but you had to experience uncertainty at points, right? Heartbreak at points, problems at points. You had to be vulnerable. So people are like, I'm gonna choose not to be vulnerable, but here's the thing. If you don't choose to be it will do you. So either you actively choose to be vulnerable or life will do its own thing and force you into a scenario where you have no idea how to handle it. But the last important key takeaway was sometimes winning is not coming first. It's doing something really brave. Alright. There can be all sorts of winning, but winning doesn't have to be the first place. If you put yourself out there and you took the risk and you showed up, this is something Gary said as well. That is winning, not just the result. Keep that in mind.